this is the legend of the Colgate Lasagna, which is kind of an internet lore at this point. And here's how it goes. In 1982, Colgate sold lasagna. At least that's what the internet says. Big outlets like Food and Wine and HuffPost have written about this. There's a box of Colgate Beef Lasagna at the Museum of Failure. But then I came across this Reddit post saying this never happened, even though 90% of the internet thinks it did. That's when I went down this rabbit hole, and what I found was 10 times weirder than I ever would have expected. First, I found this tiny little snippet in a Food Digest from the 1960s saying that Colgate had in fact tried to get into food. And then I found a 1966 edition of Television Age that mentioned Colgate making a line of like frozen dinners, freeze-dried chicken, crab meat. So yeah, apparently Colgate actually did try selling food, but the lasagna story is something completely else. The beef lasagna at the Museum of Failure is what makes all of this infinitely more confusing. It's not actually proof that the Colgate lasagna ever existed. It's a recreated box that's supposedly meant to symbolize branding failure, but this is where it gets more confusing because Colgate won't outright deny that this ever happened. And because of that, people don't believe them. Their statement was never, we didn't do this, it was, we have no recollection of this. And they've gone so far as to redact any mention of like any food on any of their corporate stuff anywhere. I can just imagine being like in corporate Colgate being like, did we do this or did we not? And a lot of people think this means that Colgate actually did try to sell lasagna, but they backpedaled because they won't just outright say they didn't do it. So is the internet gaslighting Colgate, or is Colgate gaslighting the internet? I don't know. But now let's talk about why Colgate would ever even think to get into frozen food. So in the 60s, the frozen food market was exploding because more women were entering the workforce. And now families needed instant foods, and frozen dinners became a necessity rather than a novelty. And really major brands like Pillsbury and Campbell's were entering into that space. Colgate saw this and they thought they can do it too. But the big problem here is that Pillsbury had previously been known for flour and Campbell's had been previously known for soups. I don't know how this happened considering Colgate had hundreds of millions of dollars, but they believed that their brand recognition was enough to catapult them into the food market, because if Pillsbury and Campbell's could do it, why couldn't they? But there was this massive issue that seems so obvious, and that's that toothpaste and food don't mix. And Colgate wasn't just like testing the waters, they went full send on food. So they started by launching Bambinos, which were a roasted soybean product that came in a can, but it had this horrible reputation for making people very farty. And it was so bad that it got pulled off of shelves in less than a year. There's virtually no evidence of the Bambinos except this one photo that I found and then this lawsuit between them and their supplier. Next they tried Snapples, which was a dried apple chip. It never caught on. But they also tried pudding cups and it was called Puddinhead. And again, finding evidence of these things is really hard. So Colgate tried it all. They tried all the foods, but the issue was the branding. Colgate was already deeply embedded in people's brains as toothpaste, and nobody wants to associate food with toothpaste. So even though the lasagna wasn't real, Colgate very much did try to diversify into other foods. But here's the thing, is they weren't trying to expand. This is overreach, and it didn't work. The idea of Colgate selling beef lasagna is already funny, but it's even funnier when you realize they actually tried this kind of stuff. The crab meat, the fart beans, the pudding cups, all of the most disgusting things you could possibly think of to eat after brushing your teeth. This whole thing is a perfect example of how branding works and marketing works on a psychological level. It's really hard to change what people already believe about your brand. So if you're here for the marketing lesson, here it is. Don't overreach and don't try to expand into things that don't make any sense for your brand.